I want you to imagine a scenario for a second. So you're sitting at a little outdoor cafe,
Right?
right? It's a really nice afternoon. You're just trying to enjoy coffee, maybe read a book.
Sounds lovely, honestly.
Right. But then suddenly someone just walks right past your table and they are blasting this deafeningly loud music from like a massive Bluetooth speaker.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah, you can't even hear yourself think. So how do you react, or better yet, how do the people around you react to that?
I mean, most people would be, visibly annoyed. They'd probably glare at the person, maybe mutter something under their breath, or just shake their heads.
Exactly.
You'd instantly judge that person as incredibly rude because, well, they're violating a really basic social contract about how we share public space.
Right. It's a very clear-cut moral judgment. We all agree that, forcing your noise on a captive audience is just wrong. But now I want you to take that exact same scenario, that exact same outdoor cafe, and replace the person holding the speaker with someone revving a massive, incredibly loud car engine right next to your table as they wait at a red light.
Oh, wait.
Why does our collective moral judgment suddenly change?
That's the thing, right? We might still be slightly annoyed by the noise, but we absolutely do not view it as this profound moral failure in the same way.
We don't. We really don't.
No, we don't judge the driver's character. We just think, well, that's traffic. That's what living in a city sounds like. We just accept it as this normal, inevitable part of the background noise of our lives.
And that bizarre double standard, that exact thing, is what we are getting into today. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are unpacking this really massive international study.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It was published in the journal Global Environmental Change, and it features over 2,000 participants, so a huge sample from the US, the UK, and the Netherlands.
Right.
And these researchers are investigating a psychological phenomenon that they call motonormativity.
Which is just a brilliant term, honestly. It describes something that is so deeply ingrained in our daily lives, so pervasive, that we don't even realize it's happening right inside our own heads.
The mission for our deep dive today is to really uncover these invisible biases that we all hold about driving.
Unpack the whole thing.
Exactly. We are going to map out exactly how our social and physical environments literally program these biases into our brains from birth.
It's wild when you see how early it starts.
It really is. And maybe most importantly, we're going to reveal why our assumptions about what our own neighbors actually believe are just completely, totally wrong.
So wrong.
By the time we finish exploring this research, you are going to view your morning commute, your local neighborhood streets, and even those heated city council debates in a completely different light.
I can guarantee you won't look at a crosswalk the same way ever again.
Definitely not. Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can explore why society has this giant blind spot, we really have to hold up a mirror and define what it actually looks like in practice.
Yeah, so motonormativity is defined by these researchers as a shared bias. It's where people apply entirely different moral standards, different criteria, to motorized mobility than they do to comparable topics.
It's like a special set of rules just for cars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is the psychological mechanism that makes the negative impacts of driving, the noise, the pollution, the danger, seem both totally inevitable and fundamentally unimportant.
And I know this sounds like a pretty heavy accusation, but the researchers, they didn't just ask people, hey, do you prefer cars to bikes? Because, well, people know how to answer that without revealing their underlying biases.
Right. They just say what sounds good. But what's fascinating here is the methodology they used. They used this really clever survey technique with paired comparative statements.
Oh, I loved this part.
Yeah, it's so smart. They took situations that are functionally identical in terms of their impact on society, but they swapped out the core element to be either about a car or about something else entirely. And then they asked people to rate how much they agreed or disagreed.
So, going back to our opening example, they asked people to rate the statement, people shouldn't play loud music in highly populated areas where other people have to hear it.
Right.
And then, secretly mixed into the survey later on, they asked them to rate people shouldn't drive loud cars in highly populated areas where other people have to hear them.
And the data showed a massive discrepancy there. People strongly agreed that you shouldn't subject others to your loud music, but they were far, far more lenient about subjecting people to loud car noise.
Like it's just normal.
Yeah, the moral standard shifted entirely based on the source of the noise. And they didn't just stop at noise. They tested this with public health hazards, too.
Right, the pollution comparison,
Right.
which is crazy.
Yes. They asked participants to evaluate two statements. The first was, people shouldn't smoke in highly populated areas where others have to breathe the fumes,
Makes sense.
versus people shouldn't drive in highly populated areas where others have to breathe the fumes.
Mm,
And the contrast there was actually the strongest in the entire study.
yeah.
Yeah. Exposing someone to cigarette smoke is widely viewed today as a serious violation of bodily autonomy, right? It's a huge public health hazard. But exposing them to car exhaust, which is objectively toxic and causes severe respiratory issues, is just viewed as, well, getting to work.
It's just getting to work, yeah. I was actually thinking about this and I came up with an analogy.
Well, let's hear it.
So if a private company built a factory that was pumping out toxic black fumes right next to a local children's playground,
People would lose their minds.
the community would absolutely riot. We would demand the factory be shut down immediately. But if there's a 4-lane highway with a line of cars idling and pumping out those exact same toxic fumes right next to that exact same playground,
Nobody blinks.
we just shrug and call it rush hour.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It captures exactly what the researchers mean when they conclude that the needs of motorized mobility are automatically centered in our society.
Automatically centered.
Yes. We have built this psychological framework where the car's right to operate supersedes almost all other public health or social concerns. And honestly, it gets even more pronounced when we look at how the study tackled the concept of risk and mortality.
Okay, let me guess. This is where we compare traffic to diseases.
Exactly right. One statement they posed was, there's nothing we can do to stop people dying of diseases. And the paired statement was, there is nothing we can do to stop people dying in traffic.
And the difference in the responses was huge, right?
Massive. As a society, we pour billions into medical research, fighting diseases, creating vaccines. We fundamentally believe that death by disease is an enemy we should actively combat.
Right, it's something we can fix.
But traffic deaths. Participants were far more likely to agree that traffic deaths are just something we can't stop. We view them as accidents. Tragic, yes, but fundamentally an inevitable cost of doing business in a modern society.
It's strange how we just accept that baseline level of danger. Like, oh, well, people are just going to die on the roads. And I imagine this double standard spills over into how we think about money and public resources, too.
Oh, it absolutely does. They looked at public funding by asking if we should use tax money from people who don't ride bicycles to support those who do,
Okay,
versus using tax money from people who don't drive to support those who do.
let me guess. People fiercely guard their wallets when it comes to bikes, but they happily subsidize highways, even if they, like, only take the bus.
You hit the nail on the head. People are highly skeptical of funding bike lanes if they don't personally cycle. Like, why should my money go to that?
Yeah.
But almost nobody questions the idea that non-drivers should subsidize roads, highways, and, endless parking infrastructure for drivers.
Wow.
What all of these comparisons collectively prove is that motonormativity isn't just a simple preference for driving over walking. It's not just, oh, I like my car.
Right, it's deeper than that.
It is a profound, shared cognitive distortion. We are applying a completely unique, highly forgiving set of moral rules to one specific piece of technology.
Okay, I buy the double standard. I mean, the data is hard to argue with, but I'm struggling with the origin story here. If this blind spot is so universal, where on earth does it come from?
That's the big question.
Are you telling me we're just born with some innate genetic love for internal combustion engines? Or is society doing this to us?
It is entirely learned. It's programmed into us from the moment we are born. And to explain how this happens, the researchers utilize something called a social-ecological framework.
Right. The researchers map this out like a set of nested environments. So think of it like a set of Russian nesting dolls, one inside the other, shaping your reality.
That is the best way to visualize it, yeah.
Yeah.
At the very center of the dolls is you, the individual. And the first, smallest doll surrounding you is the micro level. This is your intimate circle, your close friends and your family. What behaviors did they model for you growing up? If your parents drove you everywhere, even just a few blocks, and constantly complained about cyclists being in the way, well, that forms your baseline moral framework.
So that's the micro. Then you step out to the next doll, the meso level.
Right.
And this is your everyday observation of the local people in your broader community.
Exactly. What do you see around you?
Right. When you look out your front window, what are your neighbors doing? If every driveway on your street has two cars and you never see a single person walking on the sidewalk with groceries, that subtly tells your brain, okay, driving is the only normal, acceptable thing to do here.
Spot on. And this is where it shifts from social pressure to physical reality. Because the next doll up is the exo level.
The exo level.
Yeah. This is where it stops being just about people and starts being about structure.
Yeah.
The exo level is your physical infrastructure. It's the width of your local streets, the presence or absence of crosswalks. It's the zoning laws that put residential homes miles away from commercial stores and local government policy.
So the literal concrete. And finally, the biggest doll that holds everything else inside it, that's the macro level.
Yes.
This is your national culture, your media, the broad political discourse, and your geography. Like whether you live in a dense urban center or a really sprawling rural landscape.
And what makes this study so groundbreaking is that it didn't just theorize about these Russian dolls.
Yeah.
It actually measured their impact across different cultures.
Because they had data from 3 different countries.
Right. By surveying people in the US, the UK, and the Netherlands, they could test how these different environments actually affect a person's level of motonormativity.
And the country comparisons are really telling here. The study found that motonormativity is significantly lower in the Netherlands compared to both the UK and the US.
Which makes perfect sense when you look at their macro and exo environments. The Netherlands went through this massive cultural and infrastructural shift back in the 1970s to support non-motorized mobility.
They completely changed their Russian dolls.
They really did. They built protected cycling networks and redesigned their cities for people rather than just cars. But, and what's crucial to note here, is that the bias still exists in the Netherlands.
It hasn't disappeared completely?
No.
Yeah.
It's measurably lower, sure, but it hasn't been eliminated, which just goes to show how deeply entrenched car culture is globally.
Now, the researchers point out that these Russian dolls influence our brains through 2 distinct pathways. And the first one makes total sense to me. It's an indirect social pathway.
Yep.
This is highly linked to what we think our friends, family, and local neighbors believe about the importance of cars. Like if you think our social circle centers cars, we center cars to fit in. Simple enough.
Simple, yeah. But the second pathway is what they call a direct structural pathway. And this is where the physical environment itself bypasses your social circle entirely.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The study found that simply living in a rural area or simply living outside the Netherlands in places heavily designed for cars directly predicts higher bias, regardless of what your friends actually think.
Hold on, let me push back on this structural pathway for a second. Are you saying this isn't just a fancy form of peer pressure? You're telling me the actual physical concrete of the sidewalks and the asphalt of the highways is making us biased? Like, can a paved road actually change my moral compass?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the answer is absolutely yes.
Wow.
The physical concrete is dictating your moral boundaries. I mean, think about it practically. If you live in an exo environment where there are no sidewalks, where the only grocery store is separated from your house by a 6-lane highway with cars going 50 miles an hour and there is 0 crosswalks.
That's pretty common.
The built environment is physically enforcing the idea that the car is the only legitimate form of existence. If you try to walk, you are in physical danger. So your brain adapts to survive in that environment.
So it's a survival mechanism.
Essentially, yes. And part of that psychological adaptation is adopting the moral framework that cars belong. And anyone trying to walk or bike is a dangerous anomaly, an obstacle.
So because the infrastructure only supports cars and it's physically dangerous to do anything else, our brains just normalize the car's dominance just to make sense of the world we have to navigate every day. We don't want to live in constant cognitive dissonance, so we just accept it.
Precisely. You don't question the water you swim in.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because if we are normalizing this just to survive the environment, what happens when we try to read the minds of the other people swimming in the water with us?
Oh, this is the best part.
Right. Our perception of what our peers in those micro and meso levels actually want becomes a massive roadblock all on its own.
This is a phenomenon the researchers call pluralistic ignorance. And honestly, it might be the most hopeful, but also the most frustrating finding in the entire study.
It's so frustrating.
It really is. So pluralistic ignorance is a psychological term for a situation where a majority of group members privately reject a norm, but incorrectly assume that most others accept it. So they just go along with it to avoid standing out.
So to test this, the researchers asked participants two things. First, how much they personally supported non-motorized transport. Things like walking paths, protected cycling lanes, better public transit.
Okay.
And then they asked them how much they thought their neighbors and the general public supported those exact same things.
And the data showed a massive tragic disconnect. Participants consistently underestimated public support for non-car travel relative to their own personal support.
The statistic from the United States is staggering to me. 66% of American respondents thought that they personally supported non-car travel more than their local neighbors did. Meanwhile, only 8% felt that their neighbors were more supportive than they were.
Which mathematically is completely impossible.
Totally impossible.
You cannot have 2/3 of the population all being the single most pro-transit person in their neighborhood.
Oh.
What this shows us is that people are walking around carrying a secret, hidden support for alternative transportation. They want quieter streets, they want safer places to walk, but they are absolutely convinced they are alone in wanting it.
So we are basically trapped in a silent standoff. We're stuck in this loop of thinking nobody else wants safe walking paths, so nobody speaks up, nobody asks for them at city council meetings, and therefore, nothing ever changes.
That's exactly how it works. We judge other people's internal desires based on their external actions. So you see your neighbor driving an SUV every single day, so you assume your neighbor absolutely loves driving their SUV.
Of course you do.
But what you don't realize is that they're only driving because the exosystem, the lack of safe alternatives, gives them no other choice. We mistake survival in a car-centric system for a genuine preference for cars.
That is deeply frustrating. I mean, we're all sitting in gridlock traffic, silently wishing there was a reliable train we could take. But we're glaring at the other drivers, assuming everyone else loves the traffic.
That's a sad irony.
Ah.
And it highlights how powerful that meso level of observation is. Because we don't see people biking or walking, mainly because the infrastructure makes it too dangerous, we assume they don't want to bike or walk. We confuse a lack of safe options with a lack of public desire.
Yeah.
And this pluralistic ignorance is exactly what makes automobility so incredibly sticky. The status quo remains locked in place because the hidden support for alternatives never actualizes into social pressure.
Which raises a huge question. If we are in a silent standoff with our own neighbors, how on earth do we relate to the government institutions that are actually pouring the concrete and pulling the policy levers?
Oh, it's a mess.
Yeah.
The study uncovered a paradox here that perfectly explains why trying to change transportation policy is an absolute political minefield for any local leader.
So the researchers asked the respondents to compare their own personal support for travel policies to what they believed their government supported. And across all three nations, but it was particularly strong in the UK, respondents felt their government supported both car travel and non-car travel less than the respondents themselves did.
Let's just pause and appreciate how contradictory that is.
It makes no sense.
The same person is effectively saying the government doesn't support cars enough, and they also don't support walking and biking enough.
So what does this all mean? How can a government be perceived as failing both sides of the spectrum simultaneously?
What it implies is a pervasive, deep-seated lack of trust in government transport policy across the board. Regardless of what the policy actually is, the public assumes the government is getting it wrong.
Wow.
The researchers theorize this happens because, historically, governments haven't taken a clear, definitive stance. They try to compromise. They will widen a massive highway, but then paint a tiny, dangerous, unprotected bike lane in the gutter next to it.
Oh, I've seen those. They're terrifying.
Exactly. And as a result, they alienate the drivers who hate the construction, they terrify the cyclists who feel unsafe, and they end up pleasing absolutely no one.
If you are a policymaker listening to this deep dive, that sounds like a nightmare. You are facing a public that is deeply biased toward cars, falsely believes their neighbors are even more biased than they are, and fundamentally distrusts your ability to fix any of it. Like, how do you actually overcome that?
Well, researchers don't leave us hanging there. They actually propose several concrete solutions for policymakers to short-circuit these biases. And the first is about the macro level. It's about changing the language we take for granted.
Right. This goes back to the long-standing debate about using the word crash versus accident.
Exactly.
The study suggests we have to stop treating traffic violence as an inevitable act of God, like a thunderstorm. We have to recognize human agency. Stop saying a car hit a pedestrian as if the machine acted on its own, and start saying a driver hit a pedestrian.
Because language shapes reality. By explicitly acknowledging that private motoring imposes harms on others, you begin to break down that motonormative assumption that driving is an unassailable right without any inherent responsibilities.
Right. And then the second solution they bring up is about bypassing the tension by focusing on shared values.
This is so crucial for avoiding the trigger of motonormativity. If a city council announces a car reduction scheme or an anti-traffic initiative, people's biases instantly flare up. They feel their way of life is being attacked.
Oh, totally. People get so defensive.
But if the city council frames the exact same physical project as a child health initiative or a safe routes to school program, it activates a completely different set of moral norms.
That is so smart.
Yeah. You aren't talking about taking away street parking anymore. You're talking about protecting children from asthma and injury. And that framing helps unlock that hidden, silent support we talked about in the pluralistic ignorance finding.
It's like a psychological workaround. You aren't tricking anyone, you're just being honest about the ultimate goal of the policy. The goal isn't to hate cars. The goal is to keep kids safe.
Exactly. And the third proposed solution directly addresses the exo-level, the physical environment itself, through what the researchers call street experiments.
I found this part so fascinating. Street experiments are these temporary, intentional changes to how a street is used, like shutting down a busy road to cars for one Sunday a month, or putting up temporary planters to create a protected walking space for a weekend festival.
And the key word there is temporary. Because motonormativity makes people terrified of permanently losing their car access, temporary experiments allow a community to collectively learn and experience a different reality without the high-stakes tension of pouring permanent concrete.
It's like, well, if nobody trusts the government on this, are these street experiments basically just a try before you buy software beta test?
Yeah, a beta test.
Just a way to lower the temperature in the room before making a permanent commitment?
That's a really great way to look at it. You are short-circuiting the deeply ingrained biases of the physical environment. Remember, we discussed how the physical environment dictates our moral framework.
Yes, the concrete.
Right. You can't just tell someone who has driven their whole life that the pedestrian street is nice. They have to physically embody it. They have to walk on it, hear the quiet without the engine noise, see kids playing safely, and feel the lack of stress.
Right, they have to feel it.
That visceral sensory experience is the only way to reprogram the Russian doll of their environment.
It proves that a different world is actually possible rather than just arguing about it on a theoretical level at a town hall meeting.
And critically, it shatters the pluralistic ignorance. When people are out enjoying a temporary car-free street, they look around and see their neighbors out there enjoying it too. And suddenly they realize, oh, I'm not the only one who wants this. We all want this.
This has been a heavy but incredibly illuminating journey. Let's synthesize what we've uncovered today. We started by exploring motonormativity, the scientifically proven reality that we all hold profound double standards when it comes to the noise, pollution, and danger of driving versus anything else in our society.
And we learned that this bias is not innate. It is programmed into us by a nested framework of our family, our neighbors, our local infrastructure, and our national culture. We adapt our morality to survive the concrete environment we are forced to navigate.
And then we discovered the tragic comedy of pluralistic ignorance, that most of us secretly want better, safer alternatives to cars, but we stay silent because we falsely assume our neighbors want more traffic.
Yep.
And we learned that to break this cycle, we have to change our language, appeal to shared values like health, and run physical experiments in our streets to prove to each other that a different reality is possible.
The takeaway for you, listening to this deep dive right now, is to start actively monitoring your own motonormativity.
Yes. The next time you walk down a street or read a news headline about a traffic incident or hear a debate about local policy, notice your own reactions. Notice how the built environment around you is trying to dictate what you think is normal.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, broader question to mull over. We've spent this entire time talking about cars, but this study reveals a fundamental truth about human psychology. Our moral compass is heavily influenced by the physical world we navigate.
Right.
This raises an important question. If our physical infrastructure, the mere placement of asphalt and concrete, has the power to fundamentally alter our deepest moral judgments about what is normal or what is dangerous regarding transportation, what other supposedly objective moral judgments in your life are actually just side effects of the built environment you happen to live in?
That is a staggering thought. If the concrete can make us forgive toxic fumes and noise pollution, what else is it making us forgive? Next time you are sitting at that outdoor cafe and you hear that engine revving, ask yourself not just why you accept it, but what else you're accepting without even realizing it. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Spirituals, maybe.